Right, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to the Planning Committee. The first item on our agenda is, are there any apologies for absence?
From Councillor Will Evans and Paulette Smith, Chair.
Thanks. And then item 2, are there any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? Mary?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillors Will Thomas and Miles Langstone have made comments in the Members Community Council report and also a letter. Do we have to declare as their fellow councillors?
Jonathan can come in, but I don't believe so.
No, you don't have to declare just because they've made representations at the meeting, like you, Chair. Unless, obviously, in case if you think you are prejudiced in any way, but no, otherwise, no, it's just part of the normal course of events.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. Okay, then next item 3 is to approve and sign the minutes of the previous meetings. And we got 4 to sign off here. The first one is you'll find on page 1 in your agenda. Pages 1 to 4 is the meeting held on the 17th of July. So it's page 1, page 2, page 3 and page 4. Somebody move them as a true record, please.
Yeah, move.
Thank you. Cheers. Then the next one was the 22nd of July. And you can see there, that's on page 5. It starts on page 6 and page 7.
Yeah, move.
Next one, the third one was the 4th of August. And that starts at page 8, 9.
Just page 8, isn't it?
Just page 8,
Yeah.
sorry, yeah, you're right. I should see it. Yeah, moved.
Yes.
Yeah, move.
And the next one does start at page 9, is the final one, the 7th of August. Page 9, 10, and 11. Can you move that correct record, please?
Move.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then we have item 4. Are there any items for deferral or withdrawal?
Jeff, I could come in there. Item 2, land north of Shorty Street, Swansea. Members would have noted from the committee report and the update sheet that there are objections from the Highway Authority to the application. Having reconsidered the comments submitted and comments submitted by the applicant, we consider that to enable members to fully consider the highway issues, the application should be deferred with further information brought back on the highway situation. So recommendation to members is that that item be deferred today and be brought back to a future committee once we have more information on the highway situation.
Okay, folks.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thanks very much. So then we move on to the item 5, the agenda, as determination of planning applications under the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990. And the first item we have at page 15 is that Higher Lane. Liam, is it you?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Just wait for the presentation to come up on the screen now.
Yeah.
So this application, it proposes a residential development comprising of 31 dwellings with associated road infrastructure, drainage and landscaping, land off Higher Lane in Langland. So dealing firstly with updates. Members will note in the report the recommendation of officers is one of approval. However, the application is subject to a call-in request made to Welsh Government, who have issued a holding direction. So what this means is that until that holding direction is withdrawn by Welsh Government, the application couldn't be approved. So today we seek a resolution which is to approve subject to a Section 106 agreement and a range of planning conditions. So if members were, on the contrary, minded to refuse the application, that could be done without further notification from Welsh Government. So I just thought I'd point that out as a starter. In terms of updates, the update sheet was circulated late yesterday and again this morning with an omission there. There have been updates to conditions 2 and 3 from officers. Condition 2 was mainly just to remove reference to a plan that had since been superseded. Condition 3 has been updated to reflect some advice in relation to compliance with that condition. So the informative has been embedded within that condition. As you'll note, additional objections have been received and those have been circulated to members. Another issue noted by officers was a minor typographical error in the report on page 140. It refers to the property address 104 Pennard Drive, which is an error, and that should be 104 Higher Lane. So an error there we want to point out to members. So in terms of introduction, the site itself is shown on the location plan there before you. To the immediate south of Higher Lane, with the coast further to the south. Properties on Beaufort Avenue there to the west. Comprises of relatively irregular rectangular field measuring some 1.25 hectares. Falls gently in the north to south direction from the road there, and the site is within the Gower AONB. So I put a few slides on next to show the context and it's the site in relation to other developments. You'll see where the cursor's been shown there. That's the site area. Just off Higher Lane, you have 104 Higher Lane, a detached dwelling to the right-hand side there, and immediately opposite you have a cul-de-sac development at Channel View. So that's comprised of a range of larger detached dwellings. So you'll note running through the site there is a footpath connection. It's running from an angle, the access there in the corner, and it runs back down through and connects to the footpath there at the other side of the field. So there's an existing gate access. So if you run through the slides, I mean I've just put a few different angles in to show the context from different vantage points. You can see a zoomed in area there of the field. You can see the context of surrounding built development. You've got Beaufort Avenue there to the left-hand side, the detached dwelling to the right-hand side of the site, Channel View development. So you'll see the site has a number of boundary features in terms of trees, demarcating the site area there. So you just get your bearings there from the slide, and I've zoomed in there again just to show context. So it gives a good impression of the site really and its relationship. And that's a different angle there. You can see the access along Higher Lane. So if you move through the slides, there we are, a zoomed in area as well. So this is an officer photograph just showing that access point, the existing access point there off Higher Lane. I've put in a series of different photos now, so we'll just run through them so you get a feel for the area that we're concerned with today. So that's 104 Higher Lane adjoining the site. There's the field itself. It's looking back to the access there where that van is, and the Channel View development to the left-hand side. So you can see it's predominantly a field. And there you are, looking back there to the Channel View development on Higher Lane. So it shows the existing boundary feature there, and we'll come on to where the access is proposed then in the next few slides. So you can see how the road meanders around with the site access beyond there. We've just put a range of photos in really to get an impression. I mean, we've included here the applicant's submitted viewpoints. So we've referenced in the report these viewpoints. The applicant undertook a landscape and visual impact assessment. So viewpoint 1 being from Higher Lane itself, as we've just seen when we're going through the slides. Viewpoint 2 then on the next slide is from the Wales Coast Path, looking back up to the site. It is from a bit of a distance, but you can see the built form there along Beaufort Avenue as you're looking back up. Viewpoint 3 then, a larger view distance from the west, past Langland Bay, looking back towards the site. So that's the context of the site. In terms of the application before you, permission sought for 31 residential dwellings on the site. Of the 31, 16 are proposed to be affordable housing, comprised of 2 one-bed bungalows, 4 two-bed bungalows, 6 two-bed houses, and 4 three-bed houses. 15 of those are, well, 15 of the 31 are proposed to be for local needs open market housing, comprised of 4 two-bed houses and 11 three-bed houses. So in terms of the layout, the street-facing aspect, this will comprise of the main access into the site, with 6 dwellings to the west side of the access to your left there, and then 4 to the east on your right. As you can see, the viewpoints that we looked at earlier, with the access in the top right hand side of the top corner there, where the image, the cursor is shown there. And then the site access is obviously created in the centre point there. So the road goes into the site, it meanders towards the southeast, the run of dwellings fronting this road, whilst there's a setback fronting a new informal sort of green play area space, sort of deeper within the site, down towards the bottom end. The more informal access then is shown. You can make it out 7 to 11 in the gardens there. So the access point then running in the front of them to those properties, and that's showing then the relocated footpath that would connect in with the existing connection. So you'll note there's a good level of green infrastructure proposed. There's some clear hedgerow definition, tree-lined front, higher lane, hedgerows along the boundaries, and this is reflected on the landscaping drawings as well, which we'll come on to on the next slide. So if we move on to the next slide, so you can see there's a good element of greenery in effect. This sort of just towards the south area there, you've got that sort of informal area where the dwellings are looking onto it. It's almost like a sort of semi sort of play area in effect. And then you look back at the north, you've got retention of the hedgerow boundaries and additional planting, so tree planting there. So those dwellings aren't right up to the boundary, they're sort of set back with this almost buffer as you come in. So if we go to the next slide, this just shows the 16 affordable housing units on plan form where they are within the site. So in the light blue shading is the shared ownership, and in the purple coloured social rent. So rather than being in one part of the site, they are sort of spread out across the site. You can see the purple ones there, particularly at the front of Higher Lane. Those 2 properties are to be bungalow form. So if we go on to the next slide. Yeah, so this just gives an indication of what properties are 2-storey and what are single-storey. So you can see the pink coloured are 2-storey, and the blue shade in there is bungalow form. So that just gives an indication of the properties and how they sort of spread out across the site. So if we move on to the next slide, this gives us the street scene images provided by the applicant. So it shows the context of how it would be viewed effectively in street scene form. The first section there at the top, it's taken, so you have Higher Lane at the top, so at your right hand side, and the site slowly cascades down. Plot 6 is marked up there, so you can effectively see that fronts the internal access road that we were looking at earlier on the site layout plan, and then obviously the site gently slopes down. Street scene 2 is the plots fronting onto the green space that I mentioned earlier within the site, so the detached 2-storey dwellings there. And street scene 3 is essentially the site frontage, so this is what you would see on approach to Higher Lane, with the bungalows to the left hand side of the access, and then the 2-storey properties to the right, so all being set back then behind that buffer zone effectively. The next slides, I've included a range of elevation drawings, and I don't intend to go through everyone individually, but it just gives you a flavour of the the forms of the dwellings really, and how they differ. So we haven't got one consistent design. They have taken cues from designing the locality as part of their submitted design statements, and included largely vernacular, traditional vernacular with pitched roofs. So if you just cycle through, you can see there's a few different types. So you have the stone frontage there with render mixed in as well. Yeah, if we carry on going through, and then you've got the last one there, the elevations, is the bungalows you'll see, which are of a more of a simple form. So you can see there that the bungalows show a simple form and design. So the next slide shows some visuals of the site. So viewpoint 1, this is the site access. So as we've just looked at, really, the applicant has provided a sort of visual of how that would look on approach into the site. You can see that plot 6, I recall there, looking onto the street, and then you sort of slowly meandering down that access road with your bungalows then on the left as you get into the site. The second viewpoint there is taken at a slight distance away, so you can see the arrow there, and it's looking really back at the site then from the south. So you can see how it would form in terms of the existing built development behind. And they put in tree coverage to show how that would look. If we go on to the next slide. So in terms of the starting point, sorry, my throat is.
Stop it.
Right, so you'll see the policy there. So that gives the starting point in terms of principle of the development. There's clear support for the principle of development in the LTP. You can see the site is listed as a local needs housing exception site. The wording of the policy shows that 51%, the majority proportion, has to be affordable housing. And then it also goes into the maximum 49% needs to be for local needs market housing. So in effect, in terms of the principle of the scheme before you, the starting point is that it's acceptable on that basis. Whilst there have been a number of objections, in terms of the principle, we can't revisit that principle as part of this application. So in effect, we need to use this as the starting point and then move on to material considerations in the report. So in terms of character, it has to be accepted that to develop the site, you're going to change the character of it in terms of how it's going to look. In terms of placemaking, design and visual impacts, it's been subject to various scrutiny throughout, documented in the various design changes as evidence in the report. Officers consider the layout provides a semi-rural character. With a good level of landscaping, and offers a sensitive transition to the adjacent countryside. House types are varied, and there's enough space between the dwellings to offer some form of openness. There's traditional Gower vernacular included in terms of the design. A landscape, character, appraisal and visual impact assessment was provided as part of the application, and this has gone through looking at different viewpoints around the site. Some have criticised this document not going far enough, or considering the seascape impacts. but officers have considered the information with regard to our own responses and landscape officer responses and considered sufficient for making an informed decision. In terms of the views of the site, as the visualization produced highlights, it'll be viewed against the backdrop of existing housing developments. So it can't be argued that there will be a harm on the character of the AONB. Given that backdrop of housing development, we don't feel there will be a change to the landscape in terms of the wider AONB such that we have grounds to refuse the application. In terms of residential amenity, there's sufficient separation provided throughout the site. There's a long garden provided to 104 Higher Lane adjoining the site, but that's separated by a mature boundary hedge. The layout accords of the places to live SPG, and officers are satisfied there'll be no harmful impact on the amenity of residents. In terms of highway considerations, no objections been raised by the Highway Authority. I'm very sorry.
It's all right.
My throat is.
Okay, have a drink.
Yeah, I'm trying.
You're
Yeah,
all right.
so a transport statement was submitted. It shows the additional movements from the development can be incorporated within the site and the existing traffic flows. So there's a number of enhancements proposed as part of the site. Footway provision along the site frontage, traffic calming, pedestrian crossing, the public right-of-way diversion works, and further enhancements with crossings at the junction of Cambridge Road with Higher Lane. So concerns have been raised regarding the additional traffic movements that be created, but the Highway Authority is satisfied it can be accommodated with those changes, and in all would deliver an acceptable development subject to the 106 contributions.
Better pull that glass back up, Liam.
So in terms of trees and landscaping, there have been no issues raised by our tree and landscape officers, and controls are in place to ensure that the trees and landscaping is carried out and retained. Drainage, you'll notice there has been concern raised about potential damage to the course path and SSI by means of the drainage scheme utilising an attenuation system featuring a flow restrictor, so water be transported to an open drain already in situ off-site and be allowed to flow into the sea. Council's drainage engineers are satisfied with the scheme, and a separate SUDS approval process is required outside of the application plan application process. It's been noted that there's an existing drainage channel which would be utilised, and the concrete channel is broken in places and has caused erosion, which is an existing situation. So we can't use the planning application as a means to address an existing problem with drainage, but the additional flows from the development, it can be accepted there will be some additional impact. So NRW, they provided some detailed comments on this point in their response of the 19th of June. So they confirmed the existence of the watercourse and drain that already carries water drainage from Beaufort Avenue, and there are already sections of geological deposits that have eroded along that area. They've undertaken further assessments and conclude that any concerns are reduced. They've raised no adverse impact upon the SSI and consider a condition is necessary to provide a construction environmental management plan. So in addition, the matter of potential for erosions to be dealt with by a planning obligation to deliver mitigation and maintenance against coastal erosion occurring as a result of the development. In terms of other considerations, you'll see in the report requests for financial contributions We couldn't justify them on the basis of the scale of the scheme and projected pupil numbers, given there are existing surplus of spaces in primary and secondary schools. Issues of potential land instability, archaeology and ecology are to be dealt with by conditions. In terms of the 106 requirements, so they're set out on page 150 of your report. It's broken down into different areas and contributions. So I'll run through them briefly now. The first is the affordable housing clause. The second relates to maintenance and management of trees. The third is a highway contribution, as touched on. And the fourth is a contribution to deliver improvement works on the course path. And the fifth then is to deliver mitigation and maintenance against coastal erosion. So officers consider those obligations are necessary from a planning perspective to make the development acceptable in line with the SIL regulations. And you'll note a schedule of 34 conditions to deal with all other matters. So by way of summary, the scheme will deliver a high proportion of much needed affordable and local needs housing to the area on a site allocated specifically for that purpose. So the scheme in principle runs in line with the LDP strategy. It'll provide a good level of green infrastructure, it's appropriate design vernacular, there'll be no harmful views in terms of the context of the Gower AONB. Significant improvements are made to access and highway areas, as well as works providing funds for improvements along the right of way outside the site, for example, and providing a new link to the south. Concerns of objectors are well documented, these are understood. However, the applicant has the satisfaction of officers amended their scheme throughout, and thus since 2018 to come up with this scheme which is acceptable. There are impacts arising from the development, but these could be addressed through planning conditions and the obligations set out in your report. So officer's recommendation therefore is one of approval, subject to that 106 agreement with all those obligations mentioned and the conditions contained in your report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Liam, and thank you. My sympathies there, and you did very, very well.
Yeah.
Relax for a minute now. Anyway, then the first alpha is Fiona Power. You're still with us, Fiona?
I am, yes.
And then I understand you and Councillor Miles Langston are going to share that time between you, so you begin with yourself.
Okay, before I begin, I believe you've been issued with a pack of information,
yes,
which relates to both myself and Miles. Can I refer you to photograph number 4, which I think shows a rather better photograph of the site on a sunny day. So if I can start by saying, so my name's Fiona Power, and I live in the property that lies directly to the east of this proposed development with my family, including our disabled daughter. She needs privacy, as she doesn't understand issues such as the need to close curtains at night when she gets changed, etc. It's the main reason why we purchased this very private house in 2012. The application was initially for single-storey properties along our boundary for reasons of privacy, as stated in the pre-application responses from the developer. However, this was amended to 5 two-storey houses with pitched roofs in 2019. The LDP informatives for this site clearly states that any development should be preferably low-lying, but 25 two-storey properties out of 31 doesn't constitute low-lying. Amenity considers issues of privacy, visual impact, and impact on quality of life. Yet the report summarises that as these properties are 10 metres away from our boundary, our amenity hasn't been affected. Our amenity will be massively affected. And how can someone who has never visited our property advise you, the committee, that the impact on our amenity is acceptable? 34 windows will be overlooking us, plus 7 gardens and 2 parking spaces where we currently have none. This is a clear breach of our human rights in respect to the right of peaceful enjoyment of property. We also have serious concerns regarding the distance of plot 28 from our western elevation, which should be a minimum of 20 metres away from our house due to the 2 metre plus height differential, and is currently almost 5 metres too close, as advised by an architect and in line with the Swansea residential guide. This property sits right on the boundary, and in May 20, windows were added from the living room that will look directly over our property, especially in winter when the hedgerow loses its leaves. This report also states that the vegetation between the site and our access, i.e. our hedgerow, will be removed as per a highways requirement. If this scheme has been designed around this removal, then it needs to be redesigned. The landscape and visual impact assessment dated November 19 contains a section that relates to the impact of this proposed development on local residents. This section discusses the impacts of residents in Gorsynen, Gowerton and One Lloyd and around the M4 corridor, and obviously has nothing to do with this location. This report does not contain any information on the impacts of local residents who live near this proposed development, and yet no one has noticed this enormous error. It is therefore clear that no one has actually read the LVIA properly, despite the following statement that the council's landscape officer has considered the information in full and considered that the LVIA has been professionally assessed according to best practice, and there are no adverse issues with methodology, observations or conclusions that have been reached. How can this committee be sure that the recommendation to support this application is sound when reports haven't been read, the site hasn't been visited to assess the impacts on our amenity, and no one has had the opportunity to view adequate visualisations of the proposed development, despite repeated requests by NRW? We also have serious concerns regarding the safety of any development in the site that has a known history of sinkholes and land instability. Any ground movement could have a catastrophic impact on the safety of my family and our home, and we will hold Swansea Council fully responsible. In addition, the proposed 1.8 metre close boarded fence in front of our 100 metre hedgerow will cause serious damage to this important hedgerow. We have raised these concerns and many more repeatedly throughout the planning process, but nothing has been addressed. We certainly do not feel that we have been part of the decision-making process. We ask you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Fiona. And I call in the agent for the applicant now. It's Jason. Jason Evans, please. You've got 5 minutes to address this.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Committee, for providing me with the opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicants, Coastal Housing Group and Edenstone Homes today. The applicants are delighted to be given an opportunity once again of delivering further affordable housing in the city, building on their already successful and well-established track record. The application proposal before you is for a scheme that seeks to deliver one of the key visions and objectives of the adopted Swansea Local Development Plan, and that is to deliver more affordable and low-cost housing in the Gower Fringe area. As officers have highlighted in your report, the application site under the provisions of Policy H5 is in fact allocated specifically for such purposes, and so the proposed development has addressed the requirements and objectives of this policy directly. As you will have seen from the detailed officer's report, the process of the preparation and consideration of the application proposal has been a lengthy one for all parties, ensuring all aspects have been developed and considered in a robust manner. This has involved two processes of pre-application consultation, including a public exhibition, as well as continued dialogue with officers of all relevant departments of the authority, as well as those of a number of statutory consultees throughout each stage of the process. The net result of this approach is a scheme that sees the delivery of a mix of housing unit types and tenure, setting a site that includes a variety of elements of both formal and informal amenity space. It is a scheme that sees no detriment to highway safety, that ensures access provision for all, secures the retention and enhancement of biodiversity interest on the site, as well as facilitating a harmonious addition to the immediate and wider setting of the area. Because of this, the application proposal before you sees no objection from any of the authority's own officers or those of statutory bodies on any account. We are, of course, aware that a number of local residents continue to raise concerns and objections to the proposal. However, as detailed at length in your officer's report, the application proposal has undergone significant scrutiny by your officers to ensure that it adheres to all relevant local and national planning policy requirements and objectives. With no technical or policy-related objections from either local authority or statutory body officers, the proposal is therefore in full compliance with your adopted local development plan, and in particular your objectives for the delivery of more affordable and low-cost housing in the Gower Fringe area. On the basis of this, we would like to thank officers for their efforts in determining the application in question and fully concur, of course, with their conclusions and recommendations in the report presented before you here today. Mindful then of the call-in request to the Welsh Government, we would respectfully request that you as a committee support this application and in doing so show continued faith in the applicants of delivering yet more much needed affordable housing in Swansea. Thank you for your time, Chair and members.
And then I'm going to call in the local ward member now, Councillor Miles Langston.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking to oppose the Higher Lane application. Supporting evidence has been distributed, as Fiona said, which demonstrates how the application fails to meet LDP and national planning policies. The outstanding scenic quality, historical value and geological value of this site are features that define this area of the AONB, and it is a legal responsibility of the Council to conserve and enhance these features under the Countryside and Rights of Way Act. There are over 1,800 objections from residents on all wards of Swansea, from tourists across Wales, the UK, and as far away as Canada, and less than 10 in support. The overwhelming concerns of objectors are protecting the Gower AONB, the SSSI, the Site of Special Scientific Interest, and the historical landscape. Starting with the Landscape and Visual Impact Assessment, the LVIA, which is key to the assessment of any site in a designated landscape, the Council's landscape officer stated that he's happy with its contents. This appears quite an extraordinary statement, given that it doesn't use the Gower AONB landscape character assessment and uses incorrect baseline information on the landscape, scenic, geological and historical quality. This is in direct breach of the LDP policy ER4 and the site-specific requirements for Higher Lane. The LVIA makes no consideration of the seascape or coastal impacts in the AONB, including for the SSSI, and does not consider the relevant seascape character assessment, despite the site being on the undeveloped coast in the coastal zone. And these are also direct breaches of the LDP policy ER4 and its site-specific requirements. Visualizations of the application site pre and post development haven't been provided from key locations, which is a clear non-compliance with standard best practice and pointed out by NRW and Lichfield, but simply ignored. To illustrate the lack of care that has gone into the LVIA, I quote directly from it. Key settlements relevant to this site include Gorsimon, Gallatin, Wenarloedd. Smaller settlements in the vicinity include Grovesend, Pontllew, and Tir Coed Forest Village. Relevant road receptors include the users of the M4. Now, these blatant inaccuracies totally undermine the recommendation for this committee to support the application. The LBIA conclusions state there is likely to be a large change in landscape character as development becomes a dominant long-term feature within the AUMP. It is also clearly suggests erosion of the overall landscape qualities and features that define the AONB. Despite these conclusions, the LVIA states the overall impacts in the AONB are not significant, and this is unjustifiable for two reasons. Firstly, any development in the AONB or SSSI must demonstrate that it conserves and enhances features that underpin those designations. Where there are large changes in character or erosion of the underlying qualities, impacts cannot be considered insignificant. Secondly, the Council's primary statutory duty under the Countryside and Rights of Way Act is to conserve and enhance the AONBs and SSSIs. If the Council accepts the LVIA's conclusions, then they would adopt an unlawful position in this regard. Moving on to the screening opinion, which is a statutory requirement for applications in AONBs or SSSIs, and used to determine the need for environmental impact assessment. There's a legal requirement for the screening opinion to be robust and completed within 21 days of the application. It was not produced for months after the application, and then only after repeated requests from the public. And it's also full of significant errors. It states that the site is not in the coastal zone, but it is. It also fails to mention the triple SI, where there's site drainage will discharge heavily into eroded and the unstable ravine, which you can see in photograph 1. It also fails to mention the site forms a core part of the registered Welsh historic landscape, which is of outstanding historical interest. And the hedgerows on High Lane is under planning policy terms an important hedgerow that should not be removed. It states the ground instability is not an issue, but there are known cavities within the application area identified in the developer's report, and it is within one of the high-risk areas of the UK. There have been numerous recent collapses in the immediate vicinity of the site, which have included property demolition in some cases. On the ecology, the need for further investment assessment is dismissed, despite concerns expressed by NRW over bats and badgers, and the fact the site was legally cleared during the breeding season prior to ecology studies being undertaken. This was reported to NRW and action was taken to stop clearance, but unfortunately not before the damage was done, as you can see in photos 2 and 3. The screening opinion is inaccurate and not robust, and in determining the environmental impact assessment, NRW have highlighted significant shortcomings in relation to the assessment of the landscape and visual impacts. Lichfield Planning Consultants, which was commissioned by Monmouth Community Council, also state the council does not have sufficient information to adequately assess landscape, visual and seascape impacts, nor to come to the view that environmental impact assessment is not required. There are also breaches of LDP policy as laid out in some of the information provided to you. To conclude, this application is fundamentally flawed on many levels. If the council approves this application, I am of the opinion it would be failing its democratic duties to the public. The council would also fail in its statutory duties under the Countryside and Right of Way Act, where it is legally required to demonstrate conservation and enhancement of the AONB and SSI. This would be unlawful, and you should be opposing this application.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Black, you wanted to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Anyone else, put your hand up if you can, please. I'm Mary Jones here, thank you.
I don't appear to have a hand. I'm in as a guest for some reason. A couple of questions. I've just been reading through. In terms of the right of way, I can't quite find the conclusion, what's happening with that. Are we looking at having a diversion order, or are we accepting that the dotted line through the route that was shown on the first slide is sufficient to compensate for the right of way which is currently going through the site? The second issue is relation to affordable housing. Now, in the past, I've been happy to support exception sites in the AONB because they have significant amounts of affordable housing. I think we're looking here at 51%, but I was concerned to note that a number of the units which have been termed affordable housing are in fact shared ownership properties, as opposed to social rented housing and intermediate housing where prices of rents are above those of social rent. Now, the national planning guidance says that it is recognised that some schemes may provide for staircasing to full ownership, and where this is the case, there must be secure arrangements in place to ensure the recycling of capital receipts to provide replacement affordable housing. Now, I don't know how we interpret that. My interpretation would be that any replacement affordable housing would need to be in the same vicinity. So I'm just asking, is there any provision in here that if a shared ownership property is staircased up to full ownership, that there will be replacement affordable housing put in place in the vicinity, which could then be used by local people? I think that's quite important when we consider this. I am concerned about the low level of affordable housing. I would certainly think 51% is the bare minimum. I personally think it should be much more than that if we're to allow an exception. And I also have concerns about the ecology of the site and some of the issues which Councillor Langston have just outlined above. But I would be grateful for those two questions to be answered if possible. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, yeah, we'll come back to that. Okay, thank you. Councillor Mary Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask a question first and then make some comments. In the updated sheet, it says about 16 weeks for the affordable housing or the local housing. Why is it only 16 weeks when other properties in other parts of or even businesses have to demonstrate? I thought it was 12 months, so I wondered why it was only 16 weeks. And I'm also concerned about the 106 contributions because, as Liam pointed out, they have to be paid on the occupation of the first dwelling, and it's quite a substantial amount of money. And because this is a site by exception, and let us be blunt, this would not be before us if it wasn't a site by exception. It wouldn't have got into the LDP. When you look at it, it is just a creep across Higher Lane, because as you said, there's 104 Higher Lane, and then the rest is Beaufort Avenue. But when you look at from the aerial photos, you can see that this looks as if it's going to start creeping across that side of the road. The site itself is, as people have pointed out, the drainage, and obviously the officer has said it can be mitigated. But Higher Lane is not really accessible for people to get to any of the shops or on a bus route. It's a not a very good bus route. It's not really the best place to have this site. I'm sorry, I think it's just something that's become available in an area where affordable housing is needed, but I actually don't think this is the right site for it. It should be further on into a village setting where there are amenities and people from the site can actually access them by walking or cycling, because I don't think they're going to be able to cycle uphill unless you go on the electric bikes. It is really a very convenient site. So I think an answer about my 16 weeks and the rest is comment.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much. So I got next, Councillor Gibbon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of comments and questions. I think on the plus side, I definitely can see the need for more affordable housing in this area, and that's to be welcomed, and in the local needs tie for the rest of it as well. I think it looks like a very nice development. I like the greening. It looks much nicer than, for example, than the other development across the road. But I do have concerns about, obviously, the fact that it's on the AONB, the proximity to the SSSI, some of the comments made about the relocation of historic hedgerows, and if you could sort of give us a bit more information to address these points. And also the lady who spoke earlier, could you give a bit more information on the points that she made about the requirement for the houses to be low-lying, and whether or not it does meet those requirements, because I'm not sure about that myself. Thank you.
Thanks. And I got Councillor Richard.
Excuse me. Chairman, the last comment about the lady that objected in the beginning, before Miles, she raised serious points, and I think that, to be honest with you, I've seen the housing developments in Skirridge and elsewhere by coastal, and they actually work very well. And the fact that they are going to be, if you like, earmarked for Mumbles people only is a great step forward. But I'm concerned over what this lady said about her house alongside the development and the changes that have been made. I would like a site visit to see what is going on there and to look from her house to see what the problem is. Because I think unless we have a concrete view of it, and we can see from her house, and I think this should be a site visit. I know we don't get many site visits. I think the last one I had was the Greyhound, but I think this is very important. I also think that this is using the social housing to develop AONB, which is agricultural land. To be honest with you, it's a site that is right on the Gower coast, and I think that this would be, if you like, the first step of us losing a lot more agricultural land in the area. But I think it's important for members to see a site visit, and I'm hoping somebody will support me for a site visit, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Des Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Of course, some of the arguments members are raising now should have been raised at the LDP time. All those questions have been answered, and of course it's now the LDP has become the council's policy, and this site is within the LDP. I do have concerns with the development of the site. It certainly looks as if it's the beginning of a wider development there. If you look at the layout, the hammerhead is obviously there to allow access further in, to impinge further in the site. But yeah, it's in the LDP and that's it. I am concerned with the drainage off the site. I know that it's the same rainfall we're going to have, but they will be diverted to certain areas now which are leaving the site, and there is already erosion to the cliff path and to the so it's a path that I use fairly often, and it's obvious to see now that erosion is taking place from the bottom of Beaufort Avenue and the bottom corner of this site. I would certainly need reassuring that this erosion is being catered for. The least we could do, I think, would be to insist on permeable surfaces where driveways, etc., to at least use the land itself to soak up any rainwater, any surface water. Lots of render, I'm not a fan of render, but these are individual houses and easier to maintain than high-rise flats. But on the other hand, I wouldn't be opposed to a site visit. It's a particularly sensitive site. It's probably one of the most sensitive sites in the LDP. I think we should give it our full consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Linda Tyler-Lloyd.
Right, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I have the same concerns as the other councillors. Also, I noted that there are 175 objections and only 10 support this scheme. And I don't see how we're going to retain our AONB status if we continue to claw back these fields on the fringes of the ocean. I visit a friend often in Cambridge Road, and driving through that part of the lane there, it's very much a pinch point. But apart from whether you can sort out the traffic, I'm very concerned about this sensitive part. And yes, I agree. I think we should have a site visit, but more than that, I don't think we should even be considering it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then I've got Councillor Anderson.
I've got a couple of issues, and that's all I want is officers to clarify. On page 38, first paragraph, the drainage officer, he recommends that the application to be withdrawn or deferred. Then garden sizes, they're also on about some sizes of the gardens are too small. And there's another issue with the highways officer was not happy with the proposals, and he was have his concerns been answered. And I've also read, I can't find it in here now at the moment, but I've also read that nothing can be built within, it's either 100 meters or 50 meters to a badger set. And in one of the reports, it says that there is a badger set within 25 meters of the site. Can you just clarify that all these have been sorted out, please? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No other hands up. Liam, did you want to come back with anything there?
Yes, there's a range of queries, questions, and following on from that. I mean, starting first with the last issue there about the consultation process. You'll see in the report there are concerns, obviously, at the start of the report where consultees have raised potential issues. But if you read through the report in sequence, you see that the latest consultation sort of addresses all those concerns effectively. So yes, the drainage officer did have concerns. Those were overcome with submissions further down the line. So we've included in the report all the previous concerns, and then the statutory consultees have been happy as the application has progressed with amendments. I mean, there's a range of issues there. I don't know if I'm going to be able to cover them all in terms of what people are saying. In terms of the application, we feel it has gone through the appropriate process in terms of its processing. You know, we've consulted on all the changes as they've evolved effectively, and we've given due regard to the information submitted. In terms of the LBIA, we recognise, you know, there are, you know, inconsistencies in the document and how it's formed. But that does not, that's not fundamental to the scheme, because we have to consider as officers and as a committee what the impacts arising from the development are, and providing we have sufficient information to make that decision, then we can make that decision. In terms of other comments, I mean, the right of way, it is proposed to divert that right of way. The application indicates that the right of way officer is satisfied with that proposal. And financial contribution is to be given over to the right of way, effectively to improve the right of way then as it goes outside of the site. And you'll see the connection on the submitted site location, site layout plan that shows an additional right of way then to the south. Affordable housing, I mean, effectively, it is as drafted on other schemes of affordable housing, and included in the update sheet. That information regarding the 16-week marketing actually comes from the LDP, and that is paragraph 2.5.40, which talks about persons with a local connection, and saying that exceptions to this requirement may be permitted. The property has been marketed for at least 16 weeks at market value price. In terms of the level of affordable housing, well, I hear comments that it's on the lower side, but you know, the policy does quite clearly say a minimum of 51%. So if the developer is proposing that, then we have to, you know, effectively, it is in line with that, what that policy is. Ecological issues have been raised previously. You'll note the comments from the planning ecologist in the report. There are no objections on ecological grounds. Any requirements for licenses to be undertaken outside of this process by the developer are separate. There's comments about creeping development. Well, you have to have regard to this application on its own merits. It's included in your LDP. It is there. The principle of it is accepted. As a committee, you can't consider what could come in the future. So we have to have regard to the fact that as a council we've accepted this is a residential development site for local needs housing, and we can't revisit that principle. Comment about the low-lying nature of housing. I'm not entirely sure what that is related to, other than the comments received previously in relation to residential amenity. So you'll see from the site layout, I don't know if we're able to get that up on screen, in terms of the layout of the site and how it relates to the neighbouring properties. There are gaps there in terms of boundaries, and you know, there's sufficient distances between each property as well as the neighbour, and we don't feel, from a planning perspective, that is we don't feel it's unacceptable, because it, like Ian's just putting up the details now.
If I could just come in, reference to low-lying buildings is in the amplification of the policy, and it says preferable low-lying buildings with suitable landscaping to ensure minimal adverse impact on landscape seascape. So what that's saying is preferable low-lying, but it doesn't say it has to be. Essentially, you have to consider what is the impact of the proposal on the OMB and the surrounding landscape and seascape. So that's where the low-lying building comes from. It's an indication in the amplification of the policy for higher laying.
So that's the background information, as Ian just mentioned, in terms of the LDP process, and then in this application, we're considering the planning merits of the design. So we can't really say that just because all the dwellings aren't low-lying, it's unacceptable. We have to consider it in the round. And is the design of those dwellings acceptable? Does it relate to the context of surrounding built form? To those dwellings on Beaufort Avenue, Channel View, does it relate well and comfortably with those? I think we've seen from the layout there, there are ample opportunities for garden areas. They are well spaced out. It is acceptable on this planning merit. It's been through our design, placemaking and heritage team. They've, as you've seen early in the report, they had some concerns. The applicant amended those drawings to address those concerns, really. So it's been fully scrutinised in that respect from the design aspect. There was concern raised about coastal erosion and insistence on permeable driveways. Well, there is a planning condition in the report which prevents sort of further extensions and alterations to the dwellings without needing planning permission. So that's of relevance here. I don't know if there's anything else, if any.
All right.
The chair.
Okay, thanks, Liam. I got a Councillor Black. You wanted a follow-up question?
Well, only because neither of my two questions have actually been answered, Chair.
Okay. And affordable housing was one.
One was about the staircasing provision and whether secure arrangements have been put in place for the recycling of capital receipts and where the replacement affordable housing would go if that happened. And the second one was about the right of way.
The right of way was answered.
Yeah.
The right of way question was answered.
What was the answer? I didn't hear that.
Just to be diverted, wasn't it?
It's to be diverted. What's this dotted line going through the site then?
That is the proposed route of the footpath.
That's the proposed route of the footpath. That was my question. Yeah. Okay. Could you answer the issue on the affordable housing then, please?
Okay. Right. Is Liam?
Jonathan, would you be able to clarify the 106, the content of the 106 in respect of affordable housing?
Yeah, it'll be our we've done a 106 previously on this site. You're talking about staircasing. If the affordable housing will be affordable housing in perpetuity. If it does end up with a contribution, that money then would be spent in the locality with the agreement of the housing department. But yeah, the affordable housing will have to remain as such in perpetuity on site.
Right. Okay.
It's the starting position.
How could that happen if someone staircases up to full ownership?
Is that I haven't got the there's social rented housing, isn't there, on this site?
And there was shared ownership housing as well. Yeah,
the 106 will be registered against all the properties. So any if there is staircasing, the social housing, the registered social landlord will have to pay a contribution then to the housing department to mitigate for the loss of the affordable housing. But that the starting position is that it is in perpetuity. So I think they would have to come back and amend the 106 if they wanted to pay a contribution.
Well, is that built into the 106? It does seem to me that if you have a shared ownership property, that staircasing is built into that, and the person who owns that property has the right to staircase up to 100%. At which point that ceases to become affordable housing, and therefore it isn't in perpetuity because the staircasing has effectively wiped that out.
Well, it will be the start. I'm saying the starting point is it is in perpetuity, so they would have to come. They would have to come back. But if in the event of a contribution being paid, that would have to come back to the council if in that circumstance.
So the
the council wouldn't accept the affordable housing as being lost on the site.
So that is that will be in the section 106. In the event of a shared ownership property being staircased up to 100% ownership, that a contribution will be paid and that will be put towards, that will be in there, will it?
Well, so we won't accept a contribution in the first instance, so they'd have to come back to vary it for that purpose.
So the shared ownership wouldn't be a standard lease then?
I don't know. I don't have that.
That's my point. That's my point. Unless if you have a standard shared ownership lease, there is nothing you can do to stop them staircasing up.
No, but they would have to pay back the contribution then.
And my question is, would that be in the section 106?
Yeah, it would be covered in the 106. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I'm not happy.
Okay, thank you. No one else wants to come back in? No? Oh, Matthew, I got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. There were a couple of questions on highways. Councillor Anderson, most of our original issues were to do with the internal layout, swept paths, turning head sizes, that kind of thing. The applicant's been through several iterations of their internal layout, and that is now acceptable. And there was another question, well, I can't remember from who, about sustainability. Whilst the site is it's at the upper end of what we would deem to be acceptable, it is acceptable. Bus stops are within an acceptable walking distance on Worcester Drive, and there are a range of local facilities within a 15 or 30-minute walk, which we would consider to be acceptable on the site of this nature.
Right, thanks, Matthew. Councillor Lewis, you've got your hand up again.
Chairman, I did call for a site visit.
That's right. That's what we're going to do. Unless anyone else wishes to speak.
Yeah.
Are you moving the site visit?
Yes, I am, Chair.
Is somebody seconding site visit?
I'll second it.
Right. Okay. So we need to take a vote on that first, then.
Yep.
Thanks, then.
Well, if I call him names out, ladies and gents, if you can just say for the site visit or against. Cyril Anderson.
For.
Peter Black.
For.
Louise Gibbard.
For.
Mary Jones.
For.
Mike Lewis.
For.
Richard Lewis.
For.
Des Thomas. Des Thomas.
Sorry, I was muted. For.
Linda Tyler Lloyd.
For.
And Mike White.
Mike?
For, Chair. For.
Chairman?
Yeah.
For, yes, unanimous for a site visit then.
So then we'll defer for a site visit. Yeah.
We'll take appropriate advice on arrangements and
of course.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we will sometime have a site visit. Okay then. Thank you.
To be confirmed, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
And item 2 has been deferred, so we can move on to item 3 now, which is over at Fabian Way.
Thank you, Chair. This application,
Chairman's discretion.
This application proposes the erection of a single-storey drive-through unit on land off Fabian Way. The site lies on the parcel of land adjacent to Starbucks, and an area comprising of a mix of uses, including several car dealerships, drive-throughs, builders merchant, and other commercial uses, including being near dwellings on Bevans Road. You'll see the site plan on your screen. The red line is the site area. The blue land is the Starbucks premises, and Langdon Road there, running to the south of it. In terms of site history, members may recall an application in 2016 proposing the erection of a detached tyre and auto care centre along with 2 A3 units. That application was heard at Planning Committee and was approved in June 2016 with various conditions and a Section 106 agreement. relating to a financial contribution to highway infrastructure. In terms of updates on this particular application, there's been one additional objection received prior to circulation of the update sheet. All the comments relate largely to public speaking in connection with the proposal here today, as opposed to the planning merits. So in terms of principle, the site's within strategic policy allocation SDK within the local development plan. It's a mixed use location, providing commercial, residential and employment development. In normal circumstances, a retail use should be directed to city centre or other district and local centres, which is covered by policy RC2, unless suitability of sites have first been assessed with an appropriate assessment of need and retail impact. So the applicants have submitted a sequential test, just concluded that there are no viable sites for the use, particular use proposed within Port Tenant or the Marina area. However, it should be noted the very nature of the proposal as a drive-through A1 unit is intended more to complement rather than compete with other city centre or district centre uses, running alongside the similar operations at McDonald's and Starbucks. There, the development would not be particularly out of keeping with the nature of uses in that area. So if we just move through the slides, the next slide will give us just a sort of aerial view, so you can see a Google image there of the site to the right hand side, with the entrance there to Bevans Row. The next slide then just shows it from the other side along Fabian Way, so it gives context there. So in design terms, the plans are there. The scheme will offer a single access point with parking as you enter on the left, and then parking on the right as well. It will flow around the site in a clockwise direction. The building itself, it's positioned there sort of just off centre to the right. It's not substantial in scale. It offers a contemporary design approach. The impacts from this one unit would largely be less than the impacts from the former scheme, which proposed 3 units. In design terms, it's an acceptable form of development. The application includes a landscaping scheme drawn up to include full details of tree planting at the frontage to Fabian Way. So if you go on to the next drawing, it shows the context of the landscaping. So you've got trees there fronting Fabian Way and all the way around along the access road into Bevans Row. And in addition to that, a 2-metre high acoustic fence is proposed along the boundary of the drive-through element. So in terms of residential amenity impacts, we've consulted with the pollution control colleagues. No objections have been raised to this particular scheme other than the provision of conditions related to ventilation and fume extraction. The nature of the proposed use as a 24-hour drive-through has not been objected to by pollution control, and the use would largely be similar to those uses already been undertaken at McDonald's and Starbucks. Highway safety has been considered. It's been documented in your report. The Highway Authority has, following some additional information, no objection to the development, providing a financial contribution is paid towards the programme of works on Fabian Way and subject to other conditions which we've imposed relating to providing the car parking, the construction method statement and details of cycle and motorcycle parking. In all, the developments compatible with the LDP allocation, surrounding mix of commercial uses, and given the history of approval of the site as a fallback position, raises no planning issues that would necessitate refusal. So the application is recommended for approval, subject to the details in your report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Liam. And I got Matthew. Are you with us, Matthew?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
All right. I couldn't see your name on the side there. Anyway, you've got 5 minutes to address this, Matthew.
Okay, well, I'll try not to take up too much of your time.
Right.
I'd first like to thank committee on behalf of CDP Limited for the opportunity to address you today in relation to the application proposing the erection of a drive-through unit to be occupied by Greggs at Fabian Way. I hope members are well during this difficult period, and I'd like to personally thank officers for their hard work in support of the project, and indeed others during the COVID period. I must say that I think they've been a credit to the authority. The officer's report is transparent, it's balanced, it's well informed, and it provides a reasoned justification as to why the application accords with planning policy and is considered acceptable. The report notes the use of the site for purposes as proposed is established as acceptable given the planning history of it. The proposed development will therefore complement existing uses in the immediate vicinity. Further to the above, the report notes that the proposed development represents an appropriate and sustainable form of development that will not have a significant impact upon visual or residential amenities in the locality, highway safety, drainage and ecology. It is in accordance with the provisions of the policy of the Swansea LDP. Finally, I'd like to reinforce the economic benefits linked with the proposed development, which form a material consideration in the determination of this application. The COVID-19 health crisis has had a direct impact on the property market through the disruption of both existing property transactions and proposed development. The full demand side impact upon the wider economy is yet to unfold. Notwithstanding, the Bank of England and Office of Budget Responsibility have both predicted that the UK could face its deepest recession in over 200 years. The crisis has had an immediate impact on the use of employment and office floor space. Whilst a number of national stores have recently announced closures resulting in job losses, terms have been agreed with Greggs to occupy the unit subject to planning consent being granted. The proposal is not speculative and will provide between 20 and 30 new jobs. These jobs will overwhelmingly be taken up by young people who are based within Swansea. It will provide a clear boost to the local authority. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Matthew.
No problem.
Oh, that's all right, well done. And I heard Councillor Clive Lloyd is one of the ward members wishes to speak. Clive?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. From the outset, I'll start by saying I've got nothing particularly against Greggs or their products. Quite partial to the odd vegan sausage roll myself on occasions, but I do think that this development is one step too far in this particular area. What I am disappointed about with the report is that there's been reference from the officer and the gentleman that is acting as agents that it meets all sorts of LDP criteria. I would challenge whether it actually does meet the residential and amenity impact criteria and the well-being of the residential community that is Bevans Row. I think the experience for the local community, which as you could see from the photographs, one of the nearest houses is only a few meters away from this development. The impact of the two drive-throughs, McDonald's and Starbucks, that have been in place for a number of years has been nothing short of hell for some of the people living in Bevans Row. Regular rubbish, dumped, indiscriminate parking, cars parking all times of day and night to eat the products bought from said establishments, and coupled with increased noise and pollution from the vehicles, despite being told in previous applications that there would be no detrimental impact of vehicles coming into that particular area. I think, in the report itself, I think there were initial concerns about the ingress of traffic and the ability of traffic in the area, which have been overcome. But I can't stress enough how intolerable much of the existing drive-throughs have been for the local community, as I say, with high levels of pollution and impact on well-being. The report mentions about history and refers to the previous application for the tyre centre, but I would like to bring members' attention to a previous application for a Lidl's food store in 2000, application A001035, which isn't referred to in the report. Accepting that was a different development which would have taken up the whole of the site. That was refused for the following reasons. The proposed store is not easily accessible on foot from its primary catchment area. The developer has failed to prove that there's a need for this type of store proposed in this location. And the store's location and poor pedestrian access will give rise to predominantly car-borne customer base, which will cause a significant increase in vehicle movements in close proximity to Bevans Row, to the unacceptable detriment of the amenities of local residents. That was in 2000, as I say, and at the time, as the years have gone on, we now have a situation where that application of 72 parking spaces has now been exceeded by the combination, the combination of McDonald's, Starbucks, and now an additional development that is Greggs. Again, I would say, is this establishment really needed at this location, given that we have already have two food outlets in place? And I know that there's a Greggs already less than a mile away from the proposed site that we have there at the moment. And as the officer intimated, these type of applications are more suited to a city centre location. I think the drive-through that's in Park Towie, and as I say, the Greggs that is on Newcut Road are in the ideal locations. But this development is just too close to the community of Bevans Row, and as I say, will make things difficult. I note that there are a number of conditions, and if the committee is minded to approve, although I would ask them to refuse today on the well-being and over-intensification of this type of establishment in this particular small area, I would ask that consideration be given of utilisation of the 106 monies for the benefits of the residents of Bevan Row. And that being the potential to consult residents on the installation of a green barrier, similar to what we have on Fabian Way, and which was recently installed for residents at the junction of Fabian Way and Portennant Road. I would ask for consideration to be made to a viable resident parking scheme, a bespoke parking scheme for the residents of Bevans Row to help them stop indiscriminate parking and overnight use of Bevans Row to eat whatever food is coming out of McDonald's. I know across the road in Elba Crescent, residents have a barrier which they can activate themselves, and I would ask the committee to consider that sort of safeguard for the residents of Bevans Row. I noticed that there's a mention of an acoustic fence, but it looked to me as if that was on the wrong side. It would protect Starbucks, but it offer no protection in terms of the residents. So maybe that could be looked again in terms of location. And finally, I would ask that in terms of the construction methodology, it's 8 to 6 Monday to Friday, and 8 till 12, I think it is, on a Saturday. I would ask that the Saturday working permission is withdrawn and is restricted to 5 days. So in conclusion, Chair, I would ask the committee to consider that this is one development too far, too close to the residents of Bevan Row. But if they are minded to accept, then consider those conditions, which will offer longer-term safeguards from this type of development.
Okay, thank you. You did indicate you had a letter to read out, though.
Yeah, I've got a letter from the resident. I think Liam intimated to the a further letter, was it about the not being able to access the meeting? Was it Liam who mentioned?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think this is from Miss Simmons, who is the resident whose property is closest to the
Linda Summons.
So if you're permitted, Chair, I'll just read out what she has sent in.
Please do.
Okay. Yeah, okay, I'll go for it because it's quite long. Good afternoon, my name is Linda Summons. I'm speaking on behalf of residents living in Bevans Row. Unfortunately, this is not the first occasion I've addressed the committee to highlight the total disregard by the council to our living environment due to the proliferation and encroachment of commercial premises. LDP PS2 placemaking states avoid unacceptable acceptable juxtaposition and or conflict between residential and non-residential. Avoid loss of green land, diversity of land uses. There already exist 2 fast food outlets adjacent to this proposal, with a kiosk for fast food situated within Hancock and Brown car park. Is there a need for a 4th premises of this nature? Being a main entry into Swansea and it is not appropriate advertisement for a healthy city status. I'd also like to draw your attention to the concerns of the proposal by Dŵr Cymru and West Wales Utilities. In 2001, planning application was rejected and refused on appeal, with reference to the proposal being predominantly car-borne, with an increase in vehicle movements and detrimental of the amenities of local residents. The report makes numerous comparisons to the planning application 2015-2223 Auto Tyre Centre, but did not uphold the initial refusal on the grounds of the above-mentioned objections. Over a number of years, the local authority has been made aware of the indiscriminate obstruction of all vehicle types parking over a 24-hour period. This poses a significant highway safety issue by cars running whilst exiting onto Langdon Road. The entrance to Bevans Road is continually used as a means of reversing to access Fabian Way. Another high risk factor is the slip road from the westerly direction on Fabian Way into Langdon Road. With illegal parking comes the inevitable issue of the disposal of litter from these outlets. Again, this nuisance has been repeated over a number of years, with the enforcement, for whatever reason, not forthcoming on a sustainable basis. Since November 2017, litter from McDonald's has been collected on a daily basis, documented and photographed from Bevans Row, Langdon Road, along with illegal parking images. These are contained in the six memory sticks as evidence. Much expert opinion from health organisations place emphasis on keeping reasonably fit. Unfortunately, due to the lack of pedestrian access on Langdon Road from east to west, it poses a high risk factor to resident safety, where the already existing outlets do not have acceptable pedestrian access. The report acknowledges the development will increase traffic flow. Another secondary consequence is air pollution. The area is being monitored for past exceedances of EU regulations. Therefore, we're not compliant. There is no safe level of pollution. Previous complaints to council have been ignored, with no measures taken to reduce the threat. Prior planning applications are judged on human health on their own merit. Thereby, any accumulative impact could not be taken into consideration. But under Section 36, Land Use, Planning, Development Control Planning for Air Quality, January 2017 states, determining one application in isolation does not achieve good air quality. Therefore, why is this proposal being accepted when it contradicts objectives from the LDP? It seems securing a Section 106 overrides all other considerations, even our health. The LA response to Welsh Government clean air consultation was woeful, not exactly a can-do approach. Freedom of information requests indicate that enforcement of council policies is negligible in relation to this matter. One encouraging aspect of the report was the emphasis placed on the Public Health Wales ecology biodiversity concerns on the development. This is in stark contrast to the outcome of the Park and Ride proposal 2018-1742. The outcome resulted in the slaughter of trees, wildlife and habitat to accommodate 300 car parking spaces for students and storage of 4 salt mounds. This cannot be described as enhancement. Another example in the contradictionist in planning. 50 years ago, people of the East Side fought against the environmental impact of the carbon black. The protest in part resulted in the conception of the Environment Act of today. We are, however, have to still act on environmental issues. Although the Future Generations Act is referred to, recent assessments indicate that since its inception in 2015, it has little impact on achieving its goals. It is failing to protect people. This statement is not about assuming, predicting or measuring the negative consequences of this proposal. They already exist. From experience, mitigating measures do not work. Existing outlets create extra traffic flow, air pollution, noise, odour, antisocial behaviour, e.g. verbal abuse from car owners 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have been informed that the process of appeal to inspectors or decisions made by the committee that are refused should have no redress for an applicant. We are in total support of this. Before a committee come to the decision, we ask this of you. Perhaps put yourselves in our shoes, then answer yourself with honesty. Respect residents of Bevans Road.
Okay, thank you. I can see.
Can I add something?
Well, you should have informed us you wanted to speak, Councillor.
I did.
By 12 midday yesterday.
I thought I did.
All right, fire away.
I did query with Clive where the link was because I hadn't been sent the link.
Carry on.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's also aspirational, isn't it? What we want to develop and where we want to develop it in Swansea. And taking Linda's points, do we really want, and albeit people love Greggs, but do we want that as a highlight of a main artery into Swansea City? I really don't think we do we? And at the same time, the planners seem to forget, while they say that this building would be in keeping with what's presently there, they forget about the 200 odd houses that have recently gone up along the docks. So we're only using the information to try to get a planning decision. We're not looking at the wider aspects of the community. Heavy play's been given on the economic necessity for this development. Well, the economics are really going to be of minimal benefit, aren't they? These aren't very well paid jobs. The economy isn't going to suddenly grow in Swansea because this development is going to go there. We need real job creation, good job creation, not particularly this type of job creation. So, and you know, COVID has maybe helped environmentalists in a way, hasn't it? With a lot of the issues around car pollution, vehicle pollution. And, you know, there used to be a quote regularly given when we raised issues around development on Fabian Way, that, oh no, there won't be any extra impact with vehicles coming onto Fabian Way because they're coming into Swansea anyway. They're not just going to McDonald's. They're not just going to Starbucks. Well, all the planning department must have realised quite recently that the only cars that were on Fabian Way over 2 particular weeks of COVID were all going where? To McDonald's. And you must have all seen it on YouTube, KFC, people just heading to these outlets. So the lie wasn't it? Well, there's not going to be any extra cars because no one's going to travel along Fabian Way just to go to McDonald's or just to go to Starbucks. But they do, don't they? So we can't use that one anymore, can we? To say, oh, they're just driving past, I'll pop in and go to McDonald's. So environmentally, this is the wrong thing to do. Bevans Road, the residents have been absolutely blighted by the amount of rubbish, the noise, the pollution. You've blighted their homes. And what we need now is a little bit of common sense. And if you do mind to put this through, I agree with Clive. We certainly need something. I mean, highways have said, oh, you can't put a barrier here, you can't put a barrier there. We've done it for businesses in Wine Street. We put a barrier at the bottom of Wine Street and we've got a barrier in Green Dragon Lane. So why don't we now do something for the residents and give them something back? Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. I got one hand up there, Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, my concern really is, you know, really what Councillor Lloyd said. Clearly, you've got to look at the people working in Bevans Road there. As you say, you know, there's Starbucks there, there's McDonald's there. As has been pointed out, there's in close proximity
Thank you. Councillor Mary Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I voted against the original proposal for the tyre depot because of the impact on the residents in Bevans Row. And I still think that this is the main consideration, is the impact on the residents. And I do agree with both the ward councillors, because when you've got something going on all the time and they've got the noise, the nuisance, litter nuisance, it's not fair on their quality of life. If we can do something to alleviate the parking issues they've got and the noise issues, then obviously it would become a more attractive proposal. But at the moment, this is only being put in this location, and I've got nothing against students, but it is easy food for people to eat on the go. They do throw their rubbish because we get it all along Calais, and I'm sure you get it in West Cross, Mumbles, wherever people eat their pasty, pie, whatever, and instead of disposing of the litter correctly, they just drop it on the floor. And it isn't fair. The residents are in very close proximity, and I am very concerned that there's now a different application for this site. They got it on appeal last time. We in Swansea actually turned it down, and I'm very proud to say we did protect the residents of Evans Row.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Black.
Thank you, Chair. Very much sympathetic to the point of view being put across by the ward members here. I just wanted to make one quick point about, I think Clive Lloyd referred to the bus block at the end of Baldwin's Crescent. I know as the Welsh Assembly member for the area many years ago that the residents don't actually have access to that. The only people who can use that is the buses, but I can see a point in terms of a barrier in terms of Bevans Row, and I'm very sympathetic to the point being put across by the ward members.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gibbon.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just to echo what everyone else has said, it does seem incredibly close to the row of houses, particularly the one on the end. Is there any way, if it does pass, to put in stipulations like Councillor Lloyd suggested, the green barrier and parking? Sorry, I'm getting loads of echo. I don't know if that's for you.
It's you.
Just me, is it? Okay. That's all I want to say. I'll switch the mic off.
Right. I've got Councillor Anderson next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I choose the same opinion as Councillor White. There's already two outlets there. And I also take in the point of Councillor Lloyd and Hale. I can't support this. I think there is too much going on there at the moment, especially for the residents of the row there. But I'd also think if they could come up with something that could be resident friendly, I would support it. But at this moment in time, no.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thomas. Can I unmute, please, Des?
I can't unmute him.
Gone. Maybe.
You can't for a minute.
Oh. No.
How do I invite him back in?
Just a second. There.
back in now.
Back in
Yeah.
now, Des? Oh, it's on request here, John.
Sorry, I lost connection.
That's all right. When you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Right. Can we have an answer on the possibility of a barrier?
I'll get to that.
I feel that if we refuse this and it goes to appeal, it's likely to be allowed. So therefore, I think we can gain more from the application without it going to appeal, because we'd have no control whatsoever then. It would be in everyone's interest, I think, if we could sort this out at our level.
Yeah.
Can we have an answer on that?
Yeah. Is that it, Des? Yeah? Yeah? Anyone else wish to speak before we go back to Liam? No? Thank you. Liam, do you want to... Is there anything you could answer?
Yeah, one of the points raised by Councillor Lloyd really about the acoustic fence, well, that is actually proposed on the Bevans Row side. It's not proposed on the adjoining side. So the 2-metre fence is there, and it's referred to in pollution control comments about retention of that, and subject to retention of that, they were satisfied. So I think Ian's just showing it there on screen. So we zoom in, as you take the cursor to the right, there's that line which says 2-metre high acoustic fence.
All right. Yeah, sorry, I was looking at. I was looking at.
Okay, thank you.
On the left-hand side, I was looking at that, the one on the left-hand side, it was thicker. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, we've in the report, obviously, we've placed, we've commented on the approved scheme previously, because that scheme is a legitimate fallback position. I don't know if members recall that. I mean, I've got the drawing up on my screen. I could share it to show what we approved before. So effectively, if I just share my screen, I can.
Okay, I've got it.
Is there no, Liam?
Oh, yeah, Ian's got it. Sorry. Yeah. So effectively, if you look at the top right of the drawing, that is an A3 unit, and that was proposed actually closer to Bevans Row in effect, as well. And then you've got the other unit to the left-hand side. So there were 2 A3 units approved, and then the tyre centre then below. So arguably, what planning officers are saying is, well, the impacts arising from those 3 units on the site, are largely more than the impacts arising from this particular development. So that is where we're coming from in relation to our recommendation. The impact from 1 drive-through unit is not akin really to the impact from 3 separate units. There's comments about a barrier. I'm not entirely clear on what that relates to. Is it a highway barrier that we're talking about? And I mean, in terms of the impacts arising from the development, it's more the impact from potential, I guess, noise and disturbance, which is what the acoustic barrier was. The screening was to do. So I don't know if you could just give me a bit more information.
So the issue, Liam, is that the cars will pick up their food or coffee as it currently stands, and for whatever reason they will drive into Bevans Row, sit in Bevans Row, which is a cul-de-sac, at all times of day and night, and eat their food rather than take it home or somewhere else. There's no rhyme and reason, but it's not a one-off incident. It happens regularly. Weekend, bank holidays, it happens like all day.
Okay.
So it's to give some protection from residents that they don't have to put up with that disruption.
Please don't come back in like that. Ian, you wanted to?
There's a couple of issues here, Chair. In terms of a barrier, that would have to be secured through a Section 106 agreement. The issue has to relate to the development subject of the application. So if it's an existing problem caused by the retail units that are there at the moment, the current applicant can't be required through Section 106 to resolve an existing problem related to other units. So there's potential issues there. In terms of highways, Matt will come in, I'm sure, after me, as to whether or not the barrier can physically be put there in the highway legislation anyway, and Matt will have to advise on that. But my concerns would be that it's whether it's actually related to the development, or are we looking to secure monies from an existing problem? So there may be legal issues as to whether or not we could ask for that. If legally we could ask for it, it would have to be agreed with the developer, because Section 106 is a voluntary agreement. So we would have to take that back to the developer and seek their views on whether they'd be prepared to provide it as part of this application, should members resolve to approve. So we couldn't force them to do it. We'd have to have agreement under Section 106.
Okay. And Matthew, you wanted to advise there?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I don't see how we could implement a physical barrier on Bevans Row. I don't see how that's a workable solution. You'd have to be handing out access cards to delivery drivers or taxi drivers or anybody else who's got the right to be in there. To my mind, the way to prevent people parking there is more draconian TROs, without residents parking, prohibit waiting except for access orders, that kind of thing. But as regards to a physical barrier, I don't think that's something that highways could support.
Right, thank you. And I got Des Thomas. You want to come back in, Des?
Thank you, Chair. I think we can tie it to the new application in as much as it will increase the problem. There's an existing problem with the takeaways that are currently there. This is adding 33%, if we like to put it that way. It will add to the problem. What about an access-only order for Bevans Row? Would that work?
Obviously, then it's all about enforcement. Only the police can enforce access-only order. I think you'd be better off with RP and yellow lines that can be enforced by the council.
Okay.
Well, okay. That's.
And I got Jonathan. You wanted to come in there?
Jonathan wanted to come in.
Jonathan.
Apologies, yeah.
All right.
Okay, apologies, Chair. Yes, as I was previously said, any Section 106 contribution must comply with the community infrastructure regulations. So it would have to be directly related to the development. It would have to be necessary and reasonable in scale and kind. So that would have to be considered if the developer is going to be approached for an extra contribution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Sorry, go on.
Just one thing, Chair. I know members obviously indicated concerns about particularly late night use of the street. The proposal is for 24 hours use. The option does exist if members consider it appropriate to restrict the operating hours of the premises. There is no condition recommended at the moment, but that is an option. If members did consider that, may address some of the solutions. Clearly, any condition that was attached to a permission could be subject to either an application to amend or appeal, and we would have to present the case as to why we consider it appropriate to restrict the hours, bearing in mind the existing permissions, both on this site and the adjoining sites. One thing I would point out, obviously, is outlined in the report, it is an allocated commercial site. It's part of a wider allocation for the area. So in terms of the use of that site, commercial is an identified use that is acceptable on that site. So when we consider the recommendation, we will need to take into account what the allocation is. And I think one of the members mentioned if it went to appeal following refusal, that's certainly something the inspector would be taking into account as to the appropriate uses on that site. Thank you, Chair.
That's fair, thank you. So no one else has got his hand up to speak there.
Councillor White has again.
Oh, Councillor White.
Chair, can I get a point of clarity? I thought these were retail units, commercial, Starbucks and that. I thought they were retail, not commercial.
Retail and commercial. A retail unit is a commercial use as opposed to a residential use, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, okay. Thank you all. And thank you for your contributions. So we will, in a minute, be moving to the vote on this, and just, I can understand everyone's feelings, and so, but it is a site that has already got a live scheme there. So, and it is an allocated site for such activity. But anyway, that's that. So we now move to the vote, please.
Recommendations for approval. So
Yes, sorry, yeah.
I'll call your names out now. Councillor Anderson.
If the acoustic barrier is there, I vote for it. Approve.
Condition. Councillor Black.
4.
Councillor Gibbard.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Lewis.
4.
Councillor Richard Lewis.
4.
Councillor Des Thomas.
4.
Councillor Linda Taylor Lloyd.
4.
Councillor Mike White.
Oh, I can't support this. Sorry, Chair. No.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mike.
And the chairman, Councillor
4. Yeah.
Okay. That's 9 to 1. That's approved with the conditions outlined in the report.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all, and thank you all for your contributions this afternoon. And look forward to the next meeting, which is 6th of October. Thank you.
Thanks.